Welcome to this conversation. I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Cari. And there's a few reasons why. So, first of all, let me introduce you. You are a marketing coach, a speaker, and a content creator. You've been doing this for 15 years now in the digital marketing world. Um, and what's interesting about you is that I really appreciate the buzz that you get when you are helping your clients kind of connect with their customers, right? Like, yes, it's a business and it's your profession, but you actually really enjoy doing this, right?
I do, yes.
You do indeed. You are the founder of Ripples Reach Coaching and the creator of Connection Copyright Method, and I'm going to let you kind of speak to a little bit about that and what you're doing in that world. However, what I do really want to not focus on but highlight is the reason why I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. And I mentioned this to you the other day is that I just love your approach to business. And I sense that your approach to business is the approach to life as well. But that is the fun element that you bring into business, right? Let's be honest, I think anybody listening to this who's embarked on the entrepreneurial journey will appreciate that, hey, like business is hard. It's hard work. It takes a lot of grit. It takes a lot of mental resilience. It can be really stressful. And you have the ability to approach it with a certain lightness, right? That actually makes it fun. And I think that's an important quality and skill to have. And therefore, I'm excited for this conversation.
I love that so much, Ali. Thank you. I do. I lead with fun, right? There's a lot happening around us all the time. Some things we can control, some we can't. But if we can at least approach it with realistic optimism, some positivity that doesn't go too far, right? It makes our lives a little bit better during the day. It transfers to others around us. It just helps
Yeah.
make things go a little bit better. And if you're not having fun doing what you're doing, then you're doing something wrong.
I love that.
That's just
I
kind
love
of what it is. Doing something
that.
wrong. So thank you for that. And
Absolutely. And let me just hand over
yeah.
to you to do a brief introduction, just kind of tell people what is it you're all about, what you do before we go on to our main conversation.
Yeah, thank you. So, yes, hi, I'm Carrie O'Brien. I have been in the content marketing field for over 17 years now. Got my start as a writer, project manager, editor, and have just slowly moved my way up. Ran my own content marketing agency for 11 years, and have now shifted into marketing coaching just because here's the thing. I often see clients come to me who say, "Hey, I need a blog post. Hey, I need help with my website content." And we start kind of digging in a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper. And what we find is that we don't really have a business plan. We maybe don't have a brand identity clearly defined, or, we're trying to talk to everyone who might be able to use our services instead of being really like focused and really like drilling into a niche that we can serve really well. And so what I often find myself doing, and what I found myself doing was a lot of coaching and a lot of talking around, well, business development and audience development. And let's talk branding and messaging. And oh, let's talk about, well, how does your marketing tie to your sales? And like, what's the customer experience during that whole process that you're working with them? Because I mean, yes, that's experience, it's client experience, but it's also marketing. And so, like, it just touches almost every aspect of business. And so, as I found that continually happening, I said, you know what? I think I could better serve folks in this coaching role where we can really get the foundations right, where we can build on those foundations, make sure we're not doing these random acts of marketing anymore, and really being strategic about it. And that you're right. Like when I get into that, I mean, I get energetic and I get
Yeah.
really excited, and I love doing it. And so that is where I am now. That is kind of my journey and what I'm doing now. But it all kind of goes down to helping people step into their light and shine in their awesomeness. And whether that's one leader or it's a whole team, it all kind of translates. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing. And I think that work is so important. And here's the thing, I think like when it comes to business 101, right? A lot of us get it from a theoretical perspective. Define your ideal client, right? Where are they at? What's the messaging around that? And we kind of like often do this on, I'm going to call it like a superficial level, right? But what you're able to do is that when you go deep, really deep into that, then actually what you're able to do is create a full marketing strategy and
Mhm.
actually a business plan around this, around not only how am I going to reach out to customers, but actually how am I going to develop that relationship? How am I going to serve them through my products or offerings? How do I build my business around this? And I know one of the things we've spoken about is that this is not a one and done exercise, right? Like what's happening in my client's world is changing depending on the season or where the economy is at or what's happening in the world or the
Mhm.
politics of wherever I'm living. And actually, this is an exercise that we need to do regularly and be on top of so that we can evolve our businesses to meet them, you know? And we'll make
Yeah,
sure that we have some links and things like that so people know where to find you to reach out and really get some additional support if they need it, you know?
great, great,
Excellent.
perfect.
So we met a few days last week actually, right? And we selected two random themes. The first one that got selected for you was how to create a winning team. And we can go deeper into that. And then the second one was around resilience in business. And as soon as the first one came up, you were like, that's the one for me. I don't need to even do the second one. That's the one I want to speak about, which I thought was really interesting. But I do want to check in. Now you've had a few days to process. Are we still going towards that one, or did you want to change it up?
We're still going with that one.
We're still going with that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Okay, excellent. All right. I think this is a super important topic. I think as I work with business owners, right? This is the journey that I see that we start building out our team and we're super excited because we're like, oh, now I finally have a team. I can get them to help out with the doing stuff. And actually, now I get to kind of like step up. I feel like a real business owner. I'm going to get some time back. This is going to be great. I'm going to be an
Hmm.
amazing boss, all of the things. And it often doesn't go that way, right? And often,
No.
actually, what ends up happening, and I had a conversation just the other day where somebody's like, I feel like I work for my team and my team don't work for me. And this is really hard. And it's hard to find people and it's hard to motivate people and all of the things. And I see this is a pattern that recurs over and over again. And therefore, I'm interested to get your thoughts and perspectives on this.
Oh my
So I'm going
gosh.
to start with the opening question. It's the only question that's scripted, and then we'll take it wherever the conversation takes us.
Okay.
And the opening question is, how do you get a team to perform at a superior level? Over to you.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I hope we can talk for hours. I hope you're ready. Like, did you bring water? I'm not sure. We have so much to talk about. Okay. So just a little bit of background here. So I chose this because I have actually been in leadership positions for most of my career, most of my adult life. So yes, running my own content agency, clearly CEO, having a team, all of that. Before I started that, I was in senior roles and training roles within other companies. I've led as president, board leader, several nonprofit boards. Um, and so I am very familiar with leading teams in many different environments. And so this is why I got so excited about it. Because here's the thing, that leadership, that leadership level, like getting into that and spending time there and getting your team to perform, it's like the same things really apply across the board. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in, what industry you're in. It's all about connecting with your team and helping them be who they are at their best to help your company then be its best, right?
Mm,
So, how do you get folks to perform at a superior level? So, I will say big, like high level things I think you really need to be good at and focused on is hiring and onboarding, like
mm,
right people in the right seats. Okay. You need to have clear goals and objectives for those individuals, but you also need to have clear goals, vision, values set for your company. So folks know, who they are coming in to work for, what you're working toward, what really matters. Um, Ongoing professional development, you have to provide it. You have to provide training for your team. And if you don't do the training, You have to provide a budget for them to continue to learn and grow. I firmly believe we never arrive in our roles. We always have somewhere to go next. And as long as we have that learning mindset, that growth mindset, and provide the space in which to do it, um, that also will help. And that also goes then along with like regular performance reviews, checking in with folks. Where are they? Are they meeting their clear goals and objectives? Are they not meeting them? Why not? What's holding them back? Um, the really important bit about this is that you have to be open to just hearing whatever feedback comes your way.
Mm,
And it's a space for like honest conversation, not why aren't you doing this thing, right?
mm,
Like it's you have to have a different approach to those conversations.
yeah.
Um, and then I will say two other things. You have to have a really strong culture that encourages folks to bring who they are to the table, and you have to, as a leader, lead with some certain characteristics. So, from a culture standpoint, I will say you want to be able to foster collaboration and openness along with accountability. Um, you want to encourage folks to bring their whole selves. Like, I don't believe in this personal life, work life, keeping them like separate. There's no such thing. I don't just say, okay, I'm like leaving my house, or if you're working from home, I'm leaving that room and going into this room,
Mm,
and therefore leaving all of who I am outside of work there, and then bringing just my work. There's no such thing. There's no
mm,
such thing. So understanding that folks are going to bring their whole self and encourage that and embrace that, right? That requires some flexibility, empathy, all sorts of things. But if folks feel like they can't be who they are, you're not going to get their best self.
mm,
They aren't going to be able to perform at their best because they're holding back. So um, I just think that's key. And then I would say no micromanaging. You have to trust your team.
mm,
And if you provide them the space to do what they want to do, you also provide them the space to innovate and bring new ideas to the table. And that just builds on itself from there. Um, as a leader, I will say empathy, authenticity, clarity, and transparency
mm,
are key in getting folks to talk to you, to tell you what they need, to show you what they can bring to the table, um,
mm.
and go from there. So I know that was like a lot of bullet points, but I wanted to get them all out because I feel like those are the highlights, right? Like that, if we can
Mm.
get those items in place, your team is one going to love working for you. They're going to
Yeah.
be like, my boss is amazing.
Mm,
People don't quit. They don't often quit jobs. They quit managers.
mm,
You want
yeah.
to be able to build real relationships with your team members. If you build those real relationships, they will come to work wanting to be there.
Nice.
You already know if they're the right person in the right seat. You already know they can do the work. But will they want to? And will they want to do it for you? Right? So you
Interesting.
have to give them that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that list. And like as I go through there, and I was just making notes as we go
Yeah.
along, I kind of see it categorized in three ways, right? So number one is around kind of like, hey, actually, how we hire, onboard, right? Have the right people in the right seats and get these people onto our team. The second bit then is like, hey, once they're on our team, right, what are the things that we're doing in terms of managing? And you talked about kind of like having regular reviews, giving professional development opportunities, building the culture. Um, Talked about kind of like them kind of being able to bring their whole selves to their job and, feel like authentic at work, right? Not micromanaging. Um, and then the next piece is like, hey, me as a leader, right? Some of those characteristics around empathy, authenticity, and transparency. So I think
Yeah.
that's like a really great comprehensive list that you've come up with there. And I'm curious to dive into a few of those things
Yeah.
because um, I think actually there's different schools of thoughts on some of the stuff that you said. And therefore it'll be interesting to get that perspective to really open up our minds, right? Let's talk about the first thing, hiring and onboarding, right? Small business owners, it's tough. It's tough to get talented people into our organizations, right? They have lots of opportunities. The best talent have lots of opportunities out there. Let's just spend a couple of minutes talking about like, hey, how can I get really good talent in my organization, particularly as a small to medium-sized business owner?
Yeah. I think, first of all, you need to know what you're really good at. Why do
Okay.
your clients or customers love working with you? What
Mm,
are you known for in
mm,
your network, in your industry? Um, you have to know yourself really well because as you start to grow, so whether you are starting from one or maybe a couple, like as you bring people in, you
mm,
still need to be known for that.
mm,
So if you want to bring someone in, they're going to need to understand that. And so if you speak to who you are and what your strengths are, and you pull in someone who says, that's who I am, I have those strengths, I see myself in that, I want to be there, you're
mm,
more likely to get someone who really does fit.
mm. And so
Um,
when you say your strengths, so we're looking for people with the same strengths?
not necessarily. So this
Okay.
is where you have to be very clear on what you want those first hires to do, right?
Okay.
So if you are um, doing everything and you love the client work, you don't want to do
Mm,
the admin, you don't want to do whatever it is.
mm,
You need to know here are the tasks I want to offload,
mm,
and here are the tasks I want to keep.
mm,
And then you have to write very clear job descriptions.
mm.
So that doesn't necessarily mean all the same skills. It might mean some of them.
Yeah.
Um, Probably not all the same, like technical or hard skills. A lot of the same soft skills, though.
Got it. A lot of the same soft skills. So give me some examples of that.
So I mean, it's communication styles.
Mm,
It's how you manage your time, how you manage um, interacting with clients.
mm,
Um, Not exactly the same personality. You don't have to have the same personality to make it work.
mm.
One of my like my very first hire at my agency, I'm a bit of an extrovert. I don't know if that comes through. Um,
Really?
I I love talking to people. I love interacting with clients. I love all of that. I don't care what it looks like. And my first hire, she was a writer, and one of the best I've ever known. But she's like, I'm an introvert, like very
Mm,
much an introvert.
mm,
Um, Still worked very well because we had several of the same hard skills, right? And came at it from the same like value set, which
mm.
matters.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And like,
Hmm.
so that's really interesting, right? Like you talked about the same value set. And I
Hmm.
think that's really key. Like when we're hiring people, like it's about who's going to fit in terms of like the values that we kind of operate in. Because that's a huge thing when it comes to actually assembling a team that can work well together, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
That's why you have to know who you are. And
mm,
that's you individually, but you as a business. Who are you and what do people
mm,
know you for? You
mm,
have to keep that going. So you
mm.
need to be able to communicate that even during the job description, initial phone screening, interview processes. Like it has to start early.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And how do you communicate that early?
Well, you write a really strong job description. So, um, I can tell you a lot of folks skip talking about what it's like to work at their company when writing a job description. Like, oh, well, these are the required skills and these are our preferred qualifications and
Mm,
here's, basic benefits. And I'm like, great. Who are you? Like,
mm,
what am I stepping into?
mm,
Especially as we look at younger generations, they don't want just a thing to do during the day and then go home. They want to care about it.
mm,
So when you are talking about your company, um, your passion for what you do, who you serve needs to come through. And you can say, look, you're going to fit in here if you believe in XYZ, or, you're going to build on what we have if you also have these values and bring something new to the table. Like it's however you shape that.
mm,
I mean, if you don't feel like you can do that strongly, hire a writer, like, hire someone to help you do it. You have to do it. You have to.
mm.
Otherwise,
And
like,
what's
what?
the risk of not doing it?
Well, it's why should I care?
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm going through a job search and I have 3 or 5 different, I'll just use writer because this is the world in which I was, 5 different copywriter roles in front of me, and one just lists out qualifications. And one lists out qualifications with a couple of like, well, we've been in business for 10 years. Cool. And then the others say, these are the people we serve. We love doing this because of these reasons. We started doing this work because of XYZ. Like, now you're telling me a story which connects to my brain immediately. Our brains can't help but be attracted to stories, right?
Mm, mm,
And so you're telling me a story. And if I'm in alignment with that, I'm more apt to one, apply for that job, and two, pursue that more. So
mm,
even if you're offering the same pay, right? You're offering a lot of the same benefits, a lot of the same things, but I don't know what you stand for versus the other one that I know what they stand for and I know I'm in alignment and I have 2 job offers. Which one am I going to go for?
mm. Yeah. Absolutely. And you
Hmm.
know what it reminds me of? Like, I mean, it's appealing to that kind of emotional side of us, right? And when it comes to sales, again, business 101, sales is an emotional decision, right? So we don't just talk about kind of features and specifications of our product or service. We appeal to people's emotions. And recruitment is like sales. Right?
It
Like I
is.
need to, particularly as a small business owner, if I don't have the global brand that people are naturally attracted to, I need to be able to sell my company
Mhm.
and be like, hey, this is why we exist. This is what we're all about. Come and join us in this journey, right?
Yeah.
It reminds me of the famous story where President Kennedy is touring NASA and he meets somebody in the hall and he says, "Oh, what do you do?" And the person who he meets is the janitor. And he says, "Oh, I'm helping put a man on the moon, sir." Right? Like he didn't say, "Hey, I'm the janitor. This is what I do." It's like, "Hey, I take this job so seriously that I feel part of this mission, even if I'm not directly at mission control or whatever it is."
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think that's really powerful. So thank you very much for sharing that. I think that's a really great lesson when it comes to recruitment. Let's talk about the second section. In the second section, there was a few pieces, right, where you talk about actually managing the team, and how to and how not to. The first thing well, the first place where I want to go is you spoke about culture. What is culture?
I mean, in a less defined way, it's like what it feels like to be a
Okay.
part of the company, a part of the team.
Mm,
So what atmosphere are you creating?
mm,
What and more specifically, like what policies, what procedures, what things do you what structure do you put in place to make sure that that atmosphere exists and
mm,
continues to exist, which
mm,
can get very tricky as you continue to grow and grow and grow, where
mm,
you start small and you still want to make that happen. Like you have to have stuff in place to keep it going as you
mm,
grow.
mm.
Um, so so I like to think of culture as sort of like a mindset, right?
Okay.
As a thing of, if I'm going to be a part of a team of any size, any type, I want to feel like I belong. You can't define what that means in specific steps, but you can create a space where people feel safe, where people feel heard, where people
Mm,
feel understood, even if not agreed with, um, where people are encouraged to speak up, and rewarded for bringing their whole self to the space, right? Um, that requires, yeah, some specific skills, right? I mean, that's where a lot of the interpersonal skills come, but it
mm,
also requires having a very clear understanding and like set objectives with your leadership team. Like, listen, these are the things that matter. So you are in charge of making sure that that continues with your team. And you are making sure that that continues within your team. And
mm,
if we're hitting roadblocks, what are they and how do we address them? Um, so keeping those lines of communication open and making it very clear these are the values, because it comes back to values. These are the
mm,
values that matter. How do we put them into action?
mm.
Um,
Interesting. And so on a practical level, like what does that mean? Like, okay, so um I want to create a space where people feel safe, where they belong.
mhm.
Like how do I do that? Like I'm
Yeah.
busy. I'm a business owner. I gotta manage clients. I gotta make sure the money's coming in. I gotta chase invoices. I gotta pay bills. I gotta like I hired people to make my life easier.
Mhm.
And now actually I need to think about this stuff. Like how do I even approach that?
Well, I mean, this is one of those, I might turn the tables on you, Ali. This is one of those situations where you may hire people to do some certain tasks for you, to take things off your plate, to help you in whatever, like however you define that. Like I need help in whatever way
Mm,
that is. So I'm going to
mm,
hire someone to do that for me.
mm,
Um, that person is not like a cog in a wheel. As you said earlier, like tapping into emotions, tapping into who they are. As I said, bringing their whole self. Um, humans like to feel valued. If you
mm,
feel like you're valued, you feel like you matter, you feel like you belong. So
mm.
how do you make someone feel valued, Ali? That's the
Make them feel
question.
heard.
Hmm.
Mm.
And how do you make someone feel heard?
You listen.
You listen without passing judgment.
Mm,
You listen without having an automatic response already in your head. You give them, like, you feed it back to them so that you are using words ideally that they used, but that you understand, to make it clear like this is what you're saying, or so I understand, or to make sure that I'm hearing you clearly. This is what I'm getting from this conversation. If they say yes, great. If they say no, you say, please help me understand. Let's try this again. And you give them the space and time they need to do that.
mm,
And then you don't just set it aside and never come back to it. You got to do something with it. And it could be, hey, that's a really great idea. We're not ready to do that right now, but you're open about it. You're transparent about it. You make it clear that I heard you. I get what you need. I get what you want. This is why we can do it. This is why we can't yet. But you matter to me. And I want to make sure that you know that you matter to me. So I want us to revisit this in 3 months, 2 weeks, whatever it is.
mm,
And then it's on a performance review checklist. It's on a some, like, you don't ignore it. That'll make people, one, feel heard, which will make them feel valued. And it's not just lip service. Like, you have to, like, that's where the empathy comes in. Like, you have to make sure that you're actually being present and connecting.
mm,
I mean, this is why I say you can't separate the whole self, right? You can't be one person at work and a different person at home. And if you are, like, why? Right? Um, I know from my own experience, when I can be who I am at work, I know that I can also be more creative, be
mm.
more thoughtful, be more supportive of those around me. And so that it's like this massive trickle down effect. Wherever you are, you talk to this person, well, that person's going to get that. And it starts at the top, right? That person's going to get that. And they're like, that's really cool. I'm going to keep doing that. And then that keeps going down and down the line. And that's how you build that culture, because everybody's in it.
I want to go deeper on this piece
Mm,
with some real practicalities. And before we do, I want to highlight something which I think you said was so powerful, where you said, and I forget the exact wording now, but you said, and you don't automatically respond, right? Because at that moment, I did want to respond and I held myself because you said that, right? But actually, this element of listening and then not responding straight away, I think is when I say it out loud, I'm like, oh yeah, that's doable. But actually, I think that's quite hard, particularly as a business leader, right? Whether I'm the owner or a manager in a business, because actually, often what I'm trying to do is, you know, get people to do stuff, influence people, drive my business forward. And that comes from a space of this like high energy, let's get people motivated, let's get things got done. And it's like, I need to give out all of this stuff to make things happen. But actually, what you said there was that, hey, when people need to talk about things, to be able to like sit back, listen, make them feel heard, and not have the pressure of responding straight away, right? Because I'll be honest, when I think about my early leadership days and I think about creating these spaces, because I wanted to be that great boss that everybody loves, so I'd make sure I listened to everybody. And then actually, I'd feel really drained afterwards because most people are like, hey, Ali, I need to get paid more. I need more time off. I've got things happening at home. This is really stressful. We need to hire more people. We need to do all of this stuff. And when I look down the list, I'm like, man, all of the things they're asking for is going to cost me a bunch of money, which I don't actually have. I'm struggling to even pay myself right now. So, what's the point of even kind of having these conversations? Because even if I wanted to, I can't even address half the stuff they're talking about, right? Um, but actually, what you said is like, hey, maybe I don't have a solution straight away, and that's all right. But the fact that I've heard them and been able to take it in and be able to bring it up and say, hey, listen, I hear you. And right now, this is the situation we're in, but we're not going to ignore it. Um, I think is a really powerful skill that I take on for myself right now, but actually really wish that I had in those earlier days of leadership.
Yeah, well, we
Yeah.
do feel like we have to have all the answers,
Yeah.
right? Like and I think I don't know where this stems from, like how far back this goes, but I think it's one of those kind of insidious things
Mm,
that we've been trained into is that if you're going to lead, you need to have all the answers all the time. You have to be confident. You have to show no vulnerability. You have to like, steal a facade, like whatever it is, right?
mm, mm,
Um, and the truth is, like, that's where you start building walls between you and your team. And
mm,
that's where it becomes an othering effect where, they see you as a leader, but they're not connected to you. They're
mm,
not a part of your team. They are cogs in a wheel, right? And so
mm,
you can't have that wall built.
mm.
You have to put it down
Yeah.
if your team's gonna be there. Otherwise, if what they're looking for is just more money, they'll go
Mm,
get a different job.
mm.
But they said
Yeah.
yes to you for a reason. Why did they say yes to you? Yeah,
Mm.
they may need more money, and that's valid.
Yeah.
But what else?
Yeah.
Or what is driving the money conversation? If they're
Mm,
not feeling like they're getting what they're worth, what they're valued, is it really the money, or is that just what they can only speak to?
mm.
I don't know.
Interesting.
Um,
Interesting.
so yeah, I just, I think we forget that at the end of the day, I'm here because, yes, I need to make money, but I'm also here because I want to be part of a team.
Mm,
I want to deliver. I want to participate. I want to know that what I'm doing matters here.
mm,
Um, and those are all human conditions, right? So this is all human to human, whether it's business or not. We're a human to human business, right? Like that's, manager to employee, that's, client to staff, like whatever that is, right? Um, it's we just have to step back and think,
mm,
okay, this is a person who is struggling. I'm in a position where I might be able to help. I should listen to them for a little bit.
mm.
The best gift you can give someone is your time. So give them a little bit of your time.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
yeah,
Let's talk about bringing our authentic selves to work. And I think there's different perspectives on this.
there are.
And therefore, I'm gonna kind of challenge a little bit. And I'll say, for most of my professional life, actually, when I say most, if not all, I think actually I have had the different persona, right? The Ali who's up there presenting a workshop, who's in the client meeting, who's closing a deal, is really different to the Ali who's at home trying to get his 5-year-old to go to bed and clean his room and do all other things. And I'm much more empathetic and understanding in the first scenario.
Mm,
Um, but it's different. And for most parts of my life, I've worked in environments where, as somebody who maybe doesn't fit into the mainstream culture, like I've actually been quite comfortable in that, right? So tell me about the importance of being able to bring my whole self to work.
So this is interesting. So slight aside, but it's relevant somehow. Stick with me. So just this week, I have had a really great conversation around what your strengths are, how you bring your strengths to work,
Mm,
um, and specifically in the world of like entrepreneurship or leadership or business ownership. Like when you're higher up, um, you have this skill of being a bit of a chameleon.
mm,
So you can shift to be what you need to be in any given space. The that's a phenomenal thing, right? Because as you're trying to find your way, as you're trying to figure out who you need to be for this person versus who you need to be for that person, um, the thing about that is you don't actually have to change who you are. You just have to change the focus of your conversation and potentially the way, like the words you choose or the tone you use. But it's not changing who you are or withholding parts of you. So, I struggle with this because the flip side of this is if you can be a chameleon, that means you're never really being your true self, right? Like that's the other side of the coin is, well, I'm this type of person here and I'm this type of person here. And they're bits of me, but they're not all of me. And why? Am I afraid of rejection? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. I'm afraid that that part of me is not going to be accepted, is not going to be welcomed. So thus, I'll miss the sale, or I won't get that promotion, or I'm not going to be able to get along well with my colleague because if I'm true to who I am, well, they don't agree with that, or whatever it is, right? Um, so I think that's where you have to start with yourself. You have to model it. If you show as the leader that you're coming in and being who you are and that that's okay, and then whoever comes and sits with you next, you encourage them to just like whatever walls are up, take those down and let's just have a frank conversation. It's okay. I'm not going to judge you for it. Like, I'm not going to kick you out. I'm not going to scream at you. I'm not going to do any of those. Like, we're just going to sit here and have a frank, honest conversation. The more of those you have, and the more of those where you are just authentic and vulnerable in your own space, you allow other people to see that and step into it. And that's where that trickle effect comes in.
Help me understand that on a practical basis. What does that mean on a
I
practical?
mean, if you think about like performance reviews.
Hmm.
Think about this, right? So we create goals for performance reviews that are often only driven by here's a business metric and here's how you tie it into it, and so this is what you need to hit to achieve that. And so if those aren't met, well, why aren't those met?
Hmm.
So we're coming at this immediately from a you're not performing up to our standards. What's wrong? And when you come at it from that way, all you're focusing on is performance. You're
Okay.
focusing on the cog in a wheel.
Hmm.
If you can instead, yes, I mean we have to have KPIs. Like I'm never saying get rid of KPIs, get rid of paying attention to business goals. You have to have them because this is how
Hmm.
people know how they're contributing to that, the launch to the moon, right? Like how do you play in? How do you contribute? That matters.
Hmm.
But the cog is not it. The cog is not it. In those goals, in those spaces, like those are where you also need to have focused topics on professional development, teamwork, collaboration, um, the more interpersonal and personal growth aspects. Like
Hmm.
those should also be tied in. And you never start with you're not meeting these goals. You start with talk to me about how you feel about, like, did you see that? Like how do you feel things have been going for you the past
Mm.
3 months, right? This is where the more often you have these, the better off you are. So instead of one annual review, maybe at least two. Or I think, Ali, you are the proponent of quarterly, right? Like the more you have them,
Yeah.
one, the more time you are gifting to your team.
Mm.
And two, the more often you have the ability to have these touch points that aren't just on, hey, here's our business goal, here's your goal, we're not aligning, what's wrong,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Um, it opens space for what's happening for you in your, in your environment right now. Do you feel like you have the support you need to be successful? And you start with those open-ended questions, and then you say, great. Now let's review where we've been at and the goals that we set together, because you never just set them for your like you talk about them and why they matter, right? So let's talk about those. Where are we on that? And instead of saying you met them or you failed, like let's give them a range, right?
Mm.
So like, I'm at 40% of that goal, or halfway there, or almost done, whatever it is, right? Give them a range instead of a yes or no, and say, okay, what got in the way, or how can I help you? Do we need to push that to the next quarter? Now, if it's something that is detrimental to business, say it. Like, this is where we have to be a bit more honest and transparent about why the goals matter and say, you know what, if you're not hitting this goal, then as a team, we're not hitting this goal, or as a company, we're missing the ability to upsell, like whatever it is, right? Like,
Mm.
how does it tie back to business success?
Mm. Yeah.
So it's one of these things where we have to step back from automatically saying you did it or you didn't to having more open, free conversations that lead into success, sort of successful, not successful, support you have, you don't have. Like it's it has to be more nuanced.
Yes.
It has to be more nuanced.
And I'm getting a much more clearer picture of what whole self looks like now, right?
Mm,
Because that's where we started this piece of the conversation. And what I'm getting is that it's like, hey, this is not just almost like a transactional relationship. Hey, you were meant
mm,
to close X number of deals, you didn't, what's going on? Performance review, all of these types of things, right? Actually, what it is about is, hey, instead of in that one conversation, goals is one part of the conversation, right? The other part of the conversation is collaboration with the rest of the team, professional development, personal development, because all of this stuff feeds into this, right? These are not
hmm.
just independent pieces. And that's what I'm getting kind of like from whole self, right?
Yeah.
And in order to be able to do that as a leader, it's about being able to ask those open-ended questions, understanding the nuances in people's behavior. And
Hmm.
if I take one thing from this conversation so far, is, at the start, you kind of gave this list of things, but I think they're characterized on communication, right?
Oh, big time.
Like to
Hmm.
get a team to play at a superior level, which is where we started this conversation, it's around being able to develop this skill of communication.
Hmm.
Um, and that is around the listening, that is around the empathy, that is around kind of asking the questions, that is around kind of like seeing the bigger picture to be able to actually drive that performance, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I 100%. I agree with you.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And that communication comes in the form of the written word from like the job description, to spoken to,
Mm.
job interviews or performance reviews. It covers a lot of different arenas.
Mm.
Um, I think one thing that I want to just like spend a little time on, Ali, is asking questions. But it's not just asking the questions, it's asking the right questions. It's spending the time trying to like really determining what is the information you really need to know, and then asking the questions that will get you there instead of asking, the rote questions that we get used to. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Why do those matter? Like, what do you need to know that's going to help you make this decision?
Interesting.
Ask the right questions.
So how do I know what are the right questions to ask?
Because you know what your goals are. You
Hmm.
always start with the end in mind.
Okay.
So if you are looking to hire someone in a specific role and you want to know if they're going to be able to perform in that role, okay, what do you actually need? What has to be in place for them to be successful? Okay,
Hmm.
so what questions do I need to ask so that I know they're going to be able to hit that? Maybe not right away. Why? Because onboarding, like that takes time, right? Like,
Hmm.
but to know that they're going to be able to get there.
Hmm.
So you have to start with the end in mind.
Hmm. Okay. So let's say I have an employee. They I'm thinking of a random scenario on the spot. I feel like they are not giving their all at work. They seem kind of not really care much. They show up, they don't like answer, they don't deal with customers the same way I do in terms of like the energy that they bring. They turn up late, they kind of like feel like they're just doing the bare minimum.
Mhm.
And I want to have this conversation with them to work out what's going on. How do I figure out what are the right questions to ask in this scenario?
Okay, so a few a few things. Uh, they don't interact with people the way you would. Are they
Or I
getting
want them
the
to.
right
I want them
that
to.
you want them to? Are they getting the results that you want them to get?
No.
Okay, because that's the question. Like, I mean, they might not respond or interact the way you do, but they're still getting the right results.
Hmm.
That's just well, we're different humans.
Hmm.
We have the same goals. Our clients are still happy. We're still
Hmm.
meeting all the things, right? So
Hmm.
that's okay. That's okay. But if the problem is they're not delivering,
Hmm.
and it's not exactly their communication method, it's just they're just not doing it, right? So like
Hmm.
again, what is the actual problem here? Okay. And I know you thought of this on the fly, so like that just take that for what it is. But
And let me just pause you there because
yeah,
even at that point, what you done was asked a bunch of questions to understand what the real issue was, right?
yeah.
It's like, okay, let's separate the judgment around their communication just because it's not your natural communication
Hmm.
style to results. And it's like, oh, okay, the results aren't there. So actually, this is a result conversation. It might not be a communication conversation because
Hmm.
that's the judgment part that you spoke about earlier. It's like,
Right.
oh, okay, but there is a result gap. So that's what we need to focus on.
Hmm.
It could or could
Hmm.
not be their communication style. But so even in that, you've asked a bunch of questions to
Yeah.
determine where we're really going. So thank you
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Well,
demonstrating.
I, you're welcome. That's funny. That's actually very well done. Thank you for calling that out. Um, yeah. So I think what happens here is, and so I'm just processing through the situation, thinking, okay, what we have is someone who is not performing up to standards, um, from a a business standpoint, but their attitude, the way they bring themselves to work, is also not there. So entering into a conversation like that, a few questions you have to have in mind before you even ask them. Is this a situation of this is the right person? Like, I know this person and they are meant to be here. Maybe they're in the wrong seat. So you remember that phrase I way back in the beginning of this is
Mm,
right person, right seat. You could
mm,
have the right person on your team. They could be miserable doing the work they're doing because that was just the role that was open, or they've been doing it for so long it's just like they're over it or whatever it is, right? So is that what's happening here? Is it the wrong person in the right seat? Wrong person, wrong seat? Like,
mm,
what's the core here?
mm,
Now, if you already have in place clear values set, you have your performance reviews happening on more than just once a year basis. So you have conversations with this person happening regularly, um, including like weekly or bi-weekly one-on-ones, whatever this looks like, right? But like you have those conversations. Um, there's there's still something wrong here. Um, when you go into that conversation, you can come at those questions from a point of, hey, like I want to touch base with you. I have noticed a few things that I am concerned about, and I just want to know, like, how are you?
Mm,
How are you? You enter into this from a very strong state of no judgment, full empathy. Maybe their life at home has just torn them to pieces and they don't have anything to give at work. So is this a point of, okay, do you need some time off? Do you need something different, some different type of support? Like here, is there some other kind of support I can help you find elsewhere? Right? So is that the thing that's happening? Or
mm,
is it, I'm just here to make a pay, like I'm just here to get my paycheck.
mm,
Okay, well, if part of the requirement of being on your team is being part of this culture of collaboration and teamwork and supporting the company and all of these things, and they're not participating, well, then they aren't living up to their expectations within their role. And then that's where, okay, if this doesn't work with you and doesn't work for you, is this the right place for you to be? Right?
mm,
Like, and let's have an honest conversation about that. Do you love the work? Do you love the clients? What do you love about being here? What drives you crazy about being here? Like, does this fit? If this doesn't fit, how can I help you find where you want to be, what you want to do? Because
mm,
as a leader, that's your job,
mm,
right? Like you as a leader have two jobs. Yes, you need to help make sure your company is succeeding, but you are also there to help your people develop. Excuse me, to help you're there to help your people develop, right? And
mm,
so sometimes that means helping them develop out of your company and into something different.
mm,
But if then you know they're trying to find something different, then that gives you the runway you need to bring in someone else. So you're helping them while then you have time to find someone to take their seat.
mm,
And so the whole goal out of this is one, no judgment, full empathy. How can I support while also meeting the company's goals? It's a hard conversation to
Can you
have.
repeat those four again?
Oh gosh, no.
Fine. We'll just do an edit.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, yeah, I can. I think I can, right? So the whole point is to enter into that conversation without judgment, with full empathy, figuring out how to help that person develop wherever they need to go while also ensuring business success.
Love it.
Like that's what matters.
Love it.
And that's the tricky balance of being a leader.
Mm. I think those four that you spoke about are so powerful. And just that phrase of "how are you" in
Mm,
a review conversation is not usually a question that gets asked.
mm,
And what's interesting is as you were talking through that, I got a little bit, my headspace got a little bit distracted because I was thinking about previous bosses that I've had, uh, who either did or didn't role model those behaviors. And I go back to one boss that I had who I kind of maintain was the best boss that I ever had. And actually, like, that's exactly how she operated, right? She
mm,
took a genuine interest in what was going on in my life, right? Without being kind of nosy, but like, and was able to really create an environment where I could still perform at work, number one. But number two, like, hey, if I didn't perform, like, we had real conversations about it, right?
mm,
And I think that balance of like, hey, sometimes I think we can go the wrong way. Either we're too focused on performance or we end up being that kind of best friend and then we
mm,
start making excuses for them, right, in terms of not performing. But actually the way you've structured that conversation of like, hey, I'm going to listen, we're not going to hold judgment, we're going to support and actually we're still going to do what's best for the business success is a really powerful framework that you've given here, So
mm,
I appreciate you sharing that. Um, I think this has been a really powerful conversation for me, Kari. This has been really powerful. It's challenged the way that I've thought about certain things. So I appreciate that. Um, and I think what you've been able to do really well is take an element of what's often seen as what I'm going to label it as, just because of lack of a better terminology, airy fairy concepts in leadership, right? And bring it to real life examples of like how this actually plays out in the real world, you know? And I think that's super important because when we talk about authenticity, when we talk about bringing the whole self, right? Like you've done a great job at articulating exactly what that means, number one.
Mm.
And number two, the impact that that has on your leadership style. And number three, around how this leads to superior performance. And as a leader, that's what we're guiding people to do, right? To
Mm.
actually perform at a superior level, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, Ali. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts, insights. Final part of this conversation is you get to you get to add, I should say, to our random question bank, which I'm learning is not so random because people who get these questions are often like, this is the question that was made for me, right? But you get to do two things. Number one, add a question to our question bank. And then number two, add a theme into our theme generator that as
Mm.
other people come on and have these conversations, they will be answering the questions that you've picked out. And seeing as you
Oh my
are
gosh.
so great at asking questions, I'm excited to see what you come up with.
I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. Again, this is one of those you're on the spot, make something happen.
Yes.
I don't know why that is. So I will say like from a theme standpoint, I want to continue with this leadership idea. So I would maybe say, what are the top, I don't know, top 3 to 5 qualities of a strong leader?
Mm,
Um, and why do they matter?
I like it.
Um, And that, I mean, that can go so many different ways, right?
Yeah.
Which is fun, which is fun. Um, okay, and then like rapid fire question. What is your favorite team building activity and why?
Mm. Favorite team building activity and why? If I want it to be me and I'd make you answer that, but I'm not going to do
I mean,
that.
I can answer it. I can answer it. One of my favorites is playing categories with my team. So I ran a fully virtual agency. We met maybe once a year in person, right? Um, but we were together all the time online. And so we would have team lunches, like once a month we'd have team lunches where we would bring food or I'd be the only one eating, whatever. And then we would play a game. And I loved playing categories with my team because you can find like a categories like generator online,
Mm.
and then you bring it up and you share your screen, and then you all are doing the same thing, and then and then it's fun, it's lighthearted. There's a ton of laughter. There's a ton of yelling at people for giving the same answers that you gave and not getting all the point. Like it's just lighthearted banter
Yeah.
and a nice break from, the day to day. So
Nice. I
I
like it.
love it. I love it
I
so
like
much.
it. Cari, this has been a fascinating conversation. I appreciate it. I have taken a lot from it. It's challenged some of my thinkings around creating a team, which I'm definitely going to reflect on. And I'm confident that it's brought lots of insights to the people who are going to be listening to this. I'm also going to include some stuff on how people can get in contact with you if they need to, and they'll have the relevant links there. But otherwise, I appreciate your time, energy, and valuable insights. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Ellie. This was a lot of fun.